everybody, welcome to Learn with Steph. This is one of the videos as part of our Lessons in Law series. The focus is on OCR A Level Law, but it will be useful to anybody studying law. If you like the videos, please do subscribe and press the like button at the bottom. Hello, thank you for tuning in. So today I just thought I would do a one-off lesson on the 20-mark evaluation essays. In this lesson we're going to cover the mark scheme, looking particularly at how to get to the level 4, the questions and where they appear in the exam papers, how to structure a 20-mark evaluation essay, and the process you should go through to prepare one. So looking at the mark scheme first of all, you'll see I've already highlighted level 4, fully developed and detailed, AO1 that is. So you can see there's 8 marks for AO1 and 12 marks maximum for AO3 evaluation. And this fully developed and detailed, you will see, appears throughout the mark scheme. You've got on AO3 wide-ranging, fully discussed, fully developed, and at the end it says well developed. So what we're saying here is for level 4 there needs to be detailed detailed law, detailed evaluation, and you need to cover quite a few evaluative points. And I want to also draw your attention to this phrase. Key points are fully discussed and fully developed to reach a valid conclusion. Now you will notice that that phrase valid conclusion appears both in level 4 and level 3. It isn't in level 2, and OCR Exam Board have said that it would be very difficult to get into a level 3 or a 4 without a conclusion. So this is something you must keep in mind for any 20-mark essay, not just the evaluation ones. So what's the difference really between the levels? Level 2 is partially developed, level 3 is well developed, and level 4 is fully developed. And as I've said, if you're aiming for levels 3 and 4, you must conclude. And a good way to begin might be to an extent. And then you would balance the argument and answer the question. So let's look at some key information that will be useful for you. So first of all, you know that your OCR exam, you're going to have to take 3 papers. And in all of those papers, there are 2 sections, section A and section B. And in all of those papers, section B will be, you will have to answer 3 20-mark questions. That is, if you have, if you're doing the OCR course starting in September 2020 or afterwards. So out of those 3 20-mark questions for section B, 2 of those questions will relate to the scenario and 1 of those will be an evaluation question. And we have been told that there will be the same evaluation question for both scenarios. As you know, for section B, you get the choice of 2 scenarios. There are 3 questions that follow, 2 about the scenario, 1 evaluation, and that will be the same for both scenarios. And just a quick exam tip here. I advise you do the evaluation question first. The example has also said the questions will link well to theories of morality, fault and justice. So you should include these in your answer. They will all have the phrase to what an extent, and you must answer the question in your conclusion. So in the end, you are going to say to what an extent you either agree or disagree with the statement. So overall, how would you structure your 20-mark essay? You'd structure it with a brief introduction, and then I would advise 4 evaluative paragraphs and 1 conclusion. What do you do in an introduction? Well, the first thing I would say is you keep your introduction really short. You should always refer to the question, so echo back the key words in the question. And another exam hint here, when you read a question with a highlighter pen, you highlight those key words. So if the question is about negligence and injustice, you will highlight negligence and you will highlight injustice. And in your introduction, you must use those words. You would define the area of law. So if it's about negligence, you will state negligence is when a reasonable man is doing something a reasonable man wouldn't do, or not doing something a reasonable man would do. And if relevant, so for crime or tort, really, you'd probably want to say who has the burden of proof and what the standard of proof is. So again, for negligence, you're going to be saying that the burden of proof falls on the claimant to prove that the defendant was negligent on a balance of probabilities. So within your essay, I've suggested 4 evaluative paragraphs. And I suggest you keep a really tight structure for those paragraphs. So all of your paragraphs are going to begin with a topic sentence. And in that topic sentence, you'll echo back the question and you'll state what is the topic of that paragraph. You're going to include AO1, which is knowledge about the law, because your evaluation should springboard from your knowledge. It's very difficult to write an evaluation without any law because there is no context to what you're saying. So my advice is you have a law section first. Now, some people do suggest what you could do is do the whole of, let's say it's a negligence question, you could do the whole of the law of negligence and then do evaluation. I don't advise that. If possible, I advise a more integrated approach. So you do your law, and then after you've done your law, you then do your evaluation and you create an argument. And then at the end of each paragraph, you write a concluding sentence to bring it back to the question. So it's a 4-point plan. Point, law, evaluation, conclusion. And you're going to do that 4 times. But let's have a look how this would work in practice. So let's look at this question. To what extent does the tort of negligence create injustice and confusion in the courts? So if you were writing 1 paragraph on this, and I'm going to use the reasonable man breach test as my example paragraph. So you're going to refer to the question and the area you're going to discuss. So for instance, one way, and it's always good in these law essays to use these structural connective phrases, one way, another way, a third way, finally. It's always good, and that's the same not only for evaluations, but also for scenarios. The first element, the second element. Okay, that's a really good hint. So one way the law of negligence might cause injustice is the breach reasonable man test. So notice how I've echoed back the phrase from the question, negligence, injustice. I could have said confusion, okay, but I'm going down the injustice route. And my topic for this paragraph is going to be the breach reasonable man test. The next thing is our law dump, our AO1 dump. So what would you cover? Well, you're going to define what the reasonable man test is. You always define your phrases, don't you? You're going to use that term objective, and you're going to explain what that means. And you're going to explain that it means that the defendant's characteristics are not taken into account. And you may well illustrate this with Nettleship v Western, or of course you could use this later in your AO3 paragraph. Up to you here, as long as you have the dark blue information first. So next you need to present your argument. So you're going to present one side, and you could present the side that supports it first, or the side that contradicts it. So the side that suggests it is just first, or the side that presents it's not just. So here, for instance, if we're going to argue that it does cause injustice, I might argue that it's very harsh on inexperienced people or people who are learning to do something. And I would explain that that's because they can't be expected to reach the same standard of a reasonable person. That seems very harsh. And I would illustrate that with my Nettleship v Western case, that it seemed quite harsh that she was held accountable, even though she was only learning to drive, but she was expected to be to drive to a competent standard, even though she was learning. So I might argue that. And then I would follow that with presenting the other side of the argument, i.e. why it could be argued that actually this is a just decision. And I would explain why that is. So I might refer to Lord Denning and say that he said that actually it would be more unjust not to have used the reasonable man standard because of the fact that you have to prove fault for negligence, and if you don't prove fault, the claimant will get no compensation at all. Okay, or you could say that it makes it very consistent in the court. Everyone knows where they stand. Now, when you're presenting your arguments, again, it's always useful, I think, to have some phrases that you could use. So this may be viewed, it has been argued, others have argued, some point out, on the other hand, or simply however, okay? And if you can, try to cover both sides, and you always have an illustration in every paragraph, and always a case if possible. And I suppose if you're looking for level 4, you will want to use words that suggest you're adding detail, you're expanding, you're clarifying, and possibly emphasizing. There are the sorts of words you could use in addition, or indeed, this is very important, or it is important to note, or it has also been argued, okay? And as I've said, you're aiming for 4 evaluative paragraphs. So your conclusion. So just your conclusion at the end of a paragraph. And again, it needs to be short. Don't waste too much time. And the only reason really I say to do this is, one, it keeps that question in your mind the whole way through the essay. And OCR are looking for sustained focus on the question. And secondly, it will help you when you do your final conclusion, because by the time you've written this essay in your 30 minutes, you may well have been thinking, oh, I'm not sure what is the balance of the argument. Whereas what you're doing here is you are thinking about that the whole way through. So at the end of each paragraph, you're actually saying where you feel the balance is. And so when you do your conclusion, you just quickly look at the end of each of your paragraph sentences, and that will lead you to what you're going to write in your conclusion. Okay? And again, I advise my students to use something like hence, or I love the word thus, but therefore and consequently work just as well. So again, it's quite nice to have a little tag to use to start your concluding paragraph sentence. So for your success, what do you actually need to do? Well, you need knowledge. So you need to know the law that you're evaluating. So at the end of every topic, you need to go back and you need to learn it, you need to revise it, you need to transform it into another form, whether that's a mind map or a poster or a collection of key cards or revision materials, or you make yourself a video, or whatever way you find it best to revise. You must know it really well, because without the AO1 knowledge, your evaluation itself is going to be weak. OCR suggests at least 4 cases in order to get to level 4. Okay, so make sure you have a case in every paragraph. You can, of course, have more than one. And finally, you need to know the positives of any area of law that is part of the evaluation, part of the specification, and the negatives. So you need to know at least 4 positives and 4 negatives, I would say, and it would be great if they were linked in some way. So if you take an area of law, your knowledge, you go through the different elements, if you like, and you think of a positive for that element and a negative for that element, and you might have more than one. Okay, good way to do this is through a plan, and I always advise my students to use colour here. So I always advise them to do all the positives in one colour. I usually advise green, and all the negatives in another colour, and I usually advise red. Okay, so it's quite visual for you. So you would write down all your arguments, and my advice possibly would have another column on the left where you write down the area of the law that you're talking about. So if we were doing a plan for the paragraph we've just talked about, on the left I might have another column, and I might have breach reasonable man test. Okay, and my arguments for the reasonable man test might be consistency, and it might be fairness, because you have to prove fault. And I might add to my revision notes Lord Denning, Nettleship v Western. Arguments against, I might put harsh, and that might be all I put. And I might even put Lord Denning's little quote, morally, might be morally wrong. Thank you very much for listening. If you liked the video and you found it useful, do press like. Feel free to write a comment or ask a question. I will try and get back to you on that. And please do subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thank you. That brings us to the end of this lesson in law. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like it and subscribe to find more videos. Bye.